Good morning, everybody. It is 10:30 a.m. and I'm calling this meeting of the zoning administrator to order. First off, we will look at the draft minutes for the February 20th meeting. Any public comments on that?
If you're attending in person and would like to make a public comment, please raise your hand.
For any item or no, that's just for the
minutes from the previous meeting.
Okay, seeing none, I'll close this public comment and approve them as submitted. We're now taking public comments on item 3, non-agenda matters. This is the time when any person may address matters not listed on the agenda or which are within the subject matter jurisdiction of the zoning administrator.
If you're attending in person and would like to make a comment on non-agenda items, please raise your hand. Zoning administrator, there are no public comments.
Okay, I will close that public comment and provide the statement of purpose. The zoning administrator is appointed by the Planning and Economic Development Director and has the responsibility and authority to conduct public meetings and hearings and to act on applications for minor or reduced review authority projects or entitlements. A determination or decision by the zoning administrator may be appealed to the Design Review and Preservation Board, Planning Commission, or City Council as applicable to the decision. All actions taken by the zoning administrator may be appealed within 10 calendar days. If the final day of the appeal period falls on a non-business day, the appeal period will be extended to the next business day. There are no consent items, so we will move on to our first public hearing, revocation of short-term rental permit SVR 24-028.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Zoning Administrator. So my name is Jessica Jones. I am the Deputy Director of Planning here at the city. So I'm going to be presenting the short-term rental revocation for the property located at 2508 Rancho Cabeza Drive. Oh, there we go. Sorry. Okay, so the item before you is a recommendation for a revocation of a short-term rental permit at Rancho Cabeza Drive, as I mentioned. This property has received 3 verified violation citations within a 1-year period. And pursuant to our zoning code related to short-term rentals, any property that receives 3 verified violations within a 12 consecutive month period is subject to revocation proceedings. So this is an aerial view of the subject site. So again, it's 2508 Rancho Cabeza Drive. This is for a non-hosted short-term rental. So just a very brief history. Our short-term rental ordinance was added to our zoning code in October of 2021 and was subsequently amended in August of 22 and again in July of 23. The subject short-term rental permit at Rancho Cabeza, the original short-term rental non-hosted permit was issued in March of 2023, and a renewal was issued in June of 2024. As noted on this slide, the renewal permit is valid through March of 2025. The month of the permit follows the original permit. That's why you see the March rather than a June renewal date. So this slide shows the 3 violations that I mentioned. The first was in February of 24, the second in October of 24, and then the third in December of 24. All 3 of these violations were related to violations of both city code and zoning code with related to receptacle location. The trash cans were left out longer than what is allowed per our city code. And I would also note that each of these violations, the applicant did have an appeal period in which they could appeal the violations, and appeals were not received for any of these. So the zoning code outlines a number of findings that have to be made to revoke a permit. The 2 that are associated with this particular permit are included here on this slide. The first is that circumstances under which the permit was granted have changed by the applicant to a degree that one or more of the findings required to grant the permit can no longer be made. And specific to this is again related back to the 3 verified violations and compliance with the city code, zoning code, and other related codes. And in this case, the verified violations were related to non-compliance with the city code and the zoning code. And then the second finding related to this particular permit is that 1 or more conditions of approval have been violated or have not been complied with or fulfilled. The permits for short-term rentals do include specific advisories and conditions, including compliance with all provisions of the zoning code and the city code. And as mentioned, there's 3 verified violations of that. So with that, it's recommended by the Planning and Economic Development Department that the zoning administrator by resolution revoke the non-hosted short-term rental permit for the property located at 2508 Rancho Cabeza Drive. And I will also note that we did receive 3 emails of correspondence related to this revocation. 2 of those were included as late correspondence uploaded yesterday. All 3 of those were in support of the revocation. Presentation.
Great, thank you. Is the applicant or their representative present, and do they wish to make a presentation or any comments?
Yes. I'm a representative for Avance, and some of the precautionary measures we took moving forward is establishing curbside picks via Romology moving forward if that's possible.
Okay, is that your presentation?
Yes.
Cool, thank you. With that, I will open the public comment on this item.
If you're attending in person, would like to make a public comment on this item, please raise your hand. Sir, I'm gonna go ahead and start a timer and then you'll have 3 minutes.
My name is Peter Warburg. My wife and I live adjacent to the property. There's a 5-bedroom. It has a swimming pool on the property line. We're on a very hilly site. In the summer, we've had days we've been unable to use our yard. There's parties going on. I've phoned in complaints with amplified music numerous times. The people who show up they're not neighbors. They don't care about the neighborhood. I firmly believe that no unhosted business should be allowed in a residential neighborhood.
Thank you. Any further public comments?
Timer go. Erica Lapanovich. I also live basically diagonal to the Airbnb in question. And my husband and I and our 2 kids live on Rancho Cabeza Drive. We moved to Santa Rosa, boomeranging, following that Santa Rosa dream. But my husband grew up in Santa Rosa, and this is where we wanted to raise our kids. Within the first year of us moving in, there was an enormous number of turnover. There were 7 new families that moved in. All of us, walk basically up the street to go to elementary school. When this house went up for sale, I was so excited. I thought we were going to get a new family. We have block parties. It was great. And then this happened. I was like, oh, okay, well, here it is. It's fine. It is until it wasn't. Unfortunately, I also had to make various reports, various complaints. I'm surprised that what ended up getting everyone is the trash, because I would witness multiple cars on the street. There would be multiple people, often loud parties, amplified music. And for a while, I would call Avance and I would tell them, hey, it's me again. Hi. You guys got to talk to your folks, because if you're allowing this to continue, they're going to revoke your permit. I don't want to have to call every weekend, more than once a weekend. I don't want to have to stand on my property and flag these humongous trucks that came for a party, because I didn't want them parking in front of my house. Because I was like, you're not supposed to have 10 cars on our street. This is a tiny little street. Many of you might not, I'm sure you all actually know where Rancho Cabeza Drive is, because this is your job. But most people in Santa Rosa have no idea where this little tiny street is. So it was very frustrating. And to be honest, I complained a lot and nothing ever happened. And got to the point where I thought the city wasn't listening. I felt like my blood pressure would go up whenever I would see all these cars and all these properties. And I'm trying to keep it together. I'm sorry. So I'm just so grateful that we're all here and that we're all talking about this really important issue. And thank you for listening to us. And I'm happy that it finally happened, even if it took as long as it did to get here. I'm just really hoping that I'm in support, obviously, of the revoking this permit. I also plead that it not be allowed to just switch to a different vendor. It could be Avance, and then all of a sudden it's a different person with a different name, same house, same owner, different person, different permit. I just really hope that we're looking at that as well, because our neighborhood deserves to have more families, more homes for people like us who want to make this our forever home in Santa Rosa and raise our kids. My neighbor Pete's been there for 40-something years.
45.
45 years. That's going to be me. And I just want somebody else to grow old to be across the street. Thank you.
Would anybody else like to make a public comment?
I would.
Okay, yeah.
I live down the street from this home. And then I live right next, I'm on Rancho Cabeza, and I live right next door to another short-term rental. So there's 2 short-term rentals on our street. And honestly, I feel like I don't even own my home anymore. The house has a pool. They allow 8 people, up to 12 during the day. It is incessantly noisy and a party atmosphere almost every weekend. So I'm here just to plead with the city because I don't feel like I'm being heard. I've called and I've called and I've called. My husband has called. And you get to the point where you don't feel like you're being supported at all. Sorry, it's very emotional. We have one home. This is our sanctuary. The woman that owns the home next to us has 12 homes, and they're her business. 12 Airbnbs. And so it is not a neighbor. It's a big business. She makes lots of money, and she really could care less about us and our sanctity of a normal residential home. I know it's been quiet during the winter and it's been lovely. People have been there. They've been respectful, but again, it's because of the weather. They're not outside. When it's warm, literally from May until easily November because of global warming, every weekend it is a party out there. It's alcohol, it's horrible language. I have tried to be nice. I have tried to be a good neighbor, but they don't really care. They are there, they pay good money for this home to rent it out, and they're there for like a Las Vegas experience. I don't know what else to say. I'm just at a point where, and I'm also locked in. Now I'm a real estate agent, so I know that I have to disclose that this house is next to me. So it would be very difficult. I mean, would you want to buy a house that is next to a short-term rental? It would be very difficult for us to sell. I don't want to sell. We've put a lot of money and sweat and tears into our home. We love our neighbors and our neighborhood. It's very bad. And I just hope that you can listen and maybe at least do what Petaluma or some of the other cities have done and say, only rent out for 90 days while you're on your vacation, or I don't know. I hope that there's a way that we can resolve this, that neighbors can have their homes back. And it's not a business that doesn't care about your livelihood. Thank you for listening.
Any other further public comments?
Yeah, I'd like to add. So the other thing that I think is, all this is bad, but I think one of the hardest things is that we are impacted, obviously, but on top of that, the insult on top of that is that we have to be the ones that are the policemen. There's ordinances in place, but nobody knows about the ordinance and what's going on unless we report it. So we constantly have to be the policemen to let people know what's going on. We let people know what's going on, nothing gets resolved. We call, nobody comes out, or they call the Airbnb or the Avance. We stopped doing that because all they would do is, call, it might stop for a little while and then it would stop later on. And then, of course, that complaint never goes back to the city. So like you say, there's probably the only reason why there's 3 garbage can things in there, because we could visually take a picture and document what's going on. When there's a noise ordinance, we call and nothing happens, or somebody comes back and, they can't hear it from outside. Well, they're not in our bedroom, that's right above the pool that's going on, or the other noises that are coming on. So then that's never reported. I mean, we've probably made 20 or 30 calls, if not more, on these things, and nothing ever gets reported as a strike against these Airbnbs. They just go without impunity. And that's probably the hardest thing, is we have to be the policeman. There's nobody doing that job out there. There's a stopgap, with the ordinance. But, unless we get our vigilant every single time at 2 o'clock in the morning, we're woken up. Recently, the big thing is there's been contractors that rent this out for their employees that are doing work somewhere in the area. And they must do work at night. So they come home at 2 o'clock in the morning, unpacking their trucks, yelling at each other. And, that only happens for maybe 10 minutes, but we've been woken up at 2 o'clock in the morning. We make the complaint, they come by, of course, 10 minutes, 15 minutes has passed or whatever. They've made their noise, they're finally in bed, and we've been disrupted. And so then there's nothing that's ever recorded other than, we made a complaint, but it's never a complaint that a strike goes against them. So it seems like these ordinances just don't really do anything for us. And it's very frustrating.
Thank you. Any other comments? Okay, seeing none, I will close the public comment on this item. One thing I wanted to ask about was, we heard a concern about a transfer. If this permit was revoked, would the city accept a new non-hosted short-term rental application?
Yes, excellent question, and the answer is no.
Okay.
And there's 2 pieces to that. First, with revocation, the code is very clear that the owner of which, it was revoked cannot reapply. And secondly, if they were to sell the property, the code states that the city is no longer accepting non-hosted rental permits.
Anywhere or just
Anywhere in the city. There is a cap put on, and as either permits are revoked, they are voluntarily rescinded. The city is no longer accepting new applications, so that cap will continue to go down as they leave. So there will not be another non-hosted unless the council changes the ordinance, which would be a public process. There will not be another non-hosted at that particular property.
thank you.
Great, thank you. We also heard some questions and concerns about like the code enforcement response. So I'm wondering if you might be able to talk about any changes or the program of enforcement for.
Certainly. Let me come up here so that people don't have to.
And if you
Bring their
could
necks.
introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Luke Kirk. I'm the Assistant Chief Building Official. One of my roles in the city is to oversee the Code Enforcement Department. So thank you for the opportunity to speak. I wanted to clarify some things. Under the short-term rental program, we have an officer on call 24/7. When we get a call, we respond. We're usually there within half an hour, 45 minutes at the outside. Every time a complaint is received, we go out. I want you to know that. But you're right. Sometimes we get there and the music is stopped, the disturbance is stopped. Whatever the source of the complaint was can't be determined. Many times it is, though. We've issued hundreds of citations in response to going out to complaints in the middle of the night sometimes or during the day. So beyond that, though, we take those actions. We keep very careful records about how often those violations occur, and when they're verified and a citation is issued, we communicate with the planning department that a strike has been filed against the property. If it's more than 12 months, that strike drops off and we have to start the process over again. In this case, there were 3 verified violations within that 12-month period. which is what triggered this action. Did that answer your question?
Yes, thank you. Appreciate
Can I
it.
ask a question?
Tim,
Public comment is closed, but I'm sure that
we can always take it offline
Okay.
later.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, yeah, thank you, Mr. Kirk. Yeah, so to me, this seems like a pretty straightforward revocation basis. I do appreciate the applicant representative's willingness to coordinate some sort of pickup, but I think that probably should have been an action taken place prior to any violations occurring, let alone 3 that were also not appealed. So I think we've heard from the community that outside of the 3 documented violations, there's also been a lot of disturbance. So I think that this is a very good situation for revocation. So with that, I will adopt the resolution that revokes this short-term rental permit. With that, please note that this action is final unless an appeal is filed with the city clerk's office within 10 calendar days of today's decision. For this item, that date is March 17th, 2025. Thank you. Moving on to item 2, a minor conditional use permit to operate a home occupation style and care, which falls under the land use of personal services at 1827 Lornadell Lane. We have a staff report.
As soon as he gets me up and running. I can give the report, but I can't operate the electronics.
Yeah.
There we go. So I am not Jandon Briscoe. I'm Susie Murray. Jandon went on vacation this week and I agreed so we wouldn't result in any delays on his 2 items to cover his presentation. So this first one is Hair by Jody. It's a conditional use permit for a home occupation. The image that you're looking at there shows the home with a 2-car garage and 2 off-street parking spaces in the driveway. And the address is 1827 Lornadell Lane. This is a proposal to operate a single-person hair salon and from the primary residence. While the planned business hours are from, I believe it was Tuesday through Thursday from 10 to 3. Jandon conditioned the project to allow some flexibility there that's consistent with a residential neighborhood and limited the hours from 9 a.m. to 7 p.m. Customers are required to park on site, and the home occupation is required to remain in compliance with regulations for home occupation set in the zoning code. Here is an aerial image of the site and its immediate surroundings. And then here is kind of more of a neighborhood context map. And as you can see, they're pretty much surrounded by residential all around them. And yeah. The general plan land use designation is low density residential, and that's typically, housing up to 8 units per acre, detached. And then the zoning, they're actually in a planned development area. And the policy statement really talks about building standards. And so we deferred to the R16, the implementing zoning district for that general plan land use, to look for regulations pertaining to this. And really, home occupations, the way they're conditioned and reviewed are businesses that would really feel residential, not generating a whole lot more traffic or, something that wouldn't normally be associated with a residential neighborhood, which was why, the project was conditioned for the hours. The project is categorically exempt. As I just said, it will operate very much like a residential neighborhood operates. So really negligible change there. far as I know, we have not received any public comment. There are no unresolved issues as a result of staff review. Staff's analysis concluded that all findings can be met and the applicant has reviewed and accepted the conditions of approval. And with that, it's recommended by the Planning and Economic Development Department that the zoning administrator approve a resolution for a minor conditional use permit to allow the home occupation to operate a hair salon at 1827 Laurinadale Lane. That concludes my presentation. If you have any questions for me, I'm here.
Great. Sounds good. Thank you. Is the applicant present? And if so, do they wish to make any comments?
No, I'm happy.
Great.
Been a long wait.
Thank you. Okay, I'll open the public comment for this item as well.
If you're attending in person and would like to make a comment on this item, please raise your hand. Zoning administrator, there are no comments.
Okay, great. Yeah, thank you for your patience in this process. I do appreciate going through the process because growing up, my mom went to a salon that was operated out of a garage, and I would be very surprised if they went through a permitting process.
Yeah.
So I do appreciate that diligence, and conditioned to operate as the same way as a home would, I think makes the compatibility kind of a no-brainer. So with that, I'll approve the project.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Please note this action is final unless an appeal is filed by March 17th, 2025.
Thanks.
I got my hair done.
Nice.
Not this time.
We got a permit for the.
Very good. Yeah,
We were the first ones in Santa Rosa doing it legally.
yeah, back in 99.
99.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, item 3, minor hillside development. Place and enlarge an existing deck at 2738 Treetops Way.
Okay, again, this is one of Jandon Briscoe's projects, and in order not to delay it any further, I agreed to cover for him. So this is a hillside development permit proposed at 2738 Treetops Way. Is it me?
I'm gonna have to click into.
Thank you. The project proposes to not just replace, but enlarge a deck on the backside of the home. And there's some history on this. The property owner purchased the home, I want to say 20 or so years ago. And when they purchased the home, the deck that was on the home had already been enlarged and without benefit of permit. So they really inherited a bad situation. And the deck now needs to be replaced. I haven't seen it firsthand, but that's what I understand talking to the designer. And what they wanted to do was enlarge the deck some more. You'll see the plan in a minute, but so the reason that it didn't qualify for an exemption is because the deck had been enlarged illegally before, so now it was a much more significant increase than what was permitted originally. So here's kind of an aerial neighborhood context of the property location. And again, this one is surrounded by either open space or residential on all 4 sides, and those kind of clouded areas are areas that are still within the county, little county pockets. So the general plan land use here is very low density residential, where we typically see a lot of detached housing, and on larger lots, it's got a maximum allowable residential density is 2 units per acre. So people are spaced pretty, nicely. They have a lot of room. The zoning is rural residential, RR20, and that implements that general plan land use designation. As here is kind of the site plan, and the gray area is the home's footprint. The dotted line that you see on the left side is where the existing deck is, and then that the dark line that is kind of curved outside of that is where the proposed footprint is. Oh, and I'd like to point out too, it's in a pretty heavily wooded area, which you could see on that aerial, and there are no trees proposed for removal on this. And that the project was also conditioned because of its neighbors to not start construction until later in the morning, not 7 a.m. I think it's, remember if it's either 8 or 9, but that's a new draft resolution. The project was categorically exempt from CEQA for multiple provisions, under multiple provisions, because it involves the enlargement or replacement of an existing structure, and also because it is part of a single family structure, and a single family structure is exempt from CEQA. To the best of my knowledge, we have not received any public comment. There are no unresolved issues. Staff's analysis finds that all the findings can be met, and the applicant has reviewed and accepted all conditions of approval. With that, it's recommended by the Planning and Economic Development Department that the zoning administrator approve a resolution for a hillside development permit to allow a deck replacement and enlargement at 2738 Treetops Way. And that, you have any questions for me?
Thank you. Is the applicant present, and do they wish to make any comments?
Not present. I'm not here.
Oh,
Is there anybody on?
okay. I'll take that as a no. Then I'll open public comment for this item.
If you're attending in person and would like to make a comment on this item, please raise your hand. Zoning administrator, there are no public comments.
Okay, great. I will close public comment. Yeah, thanks for the note about the trees. That was my only question, and you anticipated and answered it, so that was awesome. Yeah, similar to the last item we had, I appreciate the applicant being diligent in complying with the code and getting the required permit for this, especially buying a home that had a legal construction. It seems like a pretty straightforward project that I'll approve. So please note this action is final unless an appeal is filed by March 17th, 2025 with the city clerk's office. Thank you. That concludes our business for this meeting, so the meeting is adjourned.